This podcast is rated E for explicit and by category of true crime contains language and descriptions of crimes not suitable for young or sensitive listeners. The first thing you may notice is a few changes in our format. Over the next few weeks, you will see a new numbering system on your episodes. Additionally, each of the ladies of the Cold Case crew will host a case of their choosing. This will typically be a single episode case, although we may return to a serialized story at some point in the future. This week, Danny takes the lead and walks us through the story of Ricky Lane Thomas Jr., a 13-year-old who disappeared on November 6, 1997, from Bristow, Indiana. This is Ricky Lane Thomas, and you're listening to The Cold Case Chronicles.
I know your secret. I know the truth. I know your secrets, and I'm telling on you.
The next case we're going to cover is on 13-year-old Ricky Lane Thomas Jr. of Bristow, Indiana. And this case is from November 6th, 1997.
And Bristow is right above Kentucky. It is right there on the line.
Yeah, I tried digging into it. So first off, Bristow is an unincorporated community, which had to Google that and also asked my husband. And I'm still
still confused about it.
But basically it means it's like not an actual city. Like there's no governance. It's just kind of, it's just really small, I think.
Yeah.
So a lot of times they also call it just Perry County because that's the county it's in. But yeah, it's in southern Indiana, and it's so south that it's technically more south than Louisville because of how Indiana dips. Right. And like the next town below Perry County is Kentucky.
Right.
And also on the south side is the Ohio River. When I looked at the Perry County website, they talk about it having rolling hills, countrysides, river views, and forests, which sounds beautiful, but when it comes to a missing person case, that's not ideal.
Right.
It's very difficult to find someone in the middle of a forest or in the middle of a country when like houses are spread out miles apart. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I really did not find a ton of information on Bristow. I couldn't even really figure out what school would have been in that town.
He was in 7th grade at Perry Central.
Mm-hmm. So I wonder how many schools were in that county.
I wouldn't think very many at the time.
So it's just real small town, southern Indiana.
Like you said, lots of forests. It's a lot like our Arkansas case where do you even start? Yeah.
So on November 6th, 1997, Ricky was home from school because he had recently been expelled. His stepdad saw Ricky at home around 11:30 a.m. that day, and then supposedly John, his stepdad, went back to work. Ricky called his cousin Daisy between 1:30 and 2 p.m., and they had made plans to go shopping in Tell City, Indiana, which is about 30 minutes south. They mentioned going to McDonald's, and he specifically mentioned bringing $20 to eat at McDonald's. So Daisy only lived about 1.5 miles away from Ricky. He had planned on walking to her house, meeting up with her, and then I think she was a little bit older. How old she was?
Yes. Daisy was 23 at the time.
Okay, so Daisy was 10 years older than Ricky, but they were very close and friends. I read in an article that sometimes he would stay with her family for months. I don't know if this is true, but one of the articles said his parents would be like, he's too much for us to handle right now.
Right.
It is mentioned that he had behavioral issues. He was expelled from school for threatening a teacher is what I read. I could see how that, a 13-year-old boy is a lot to handle.
Yeah, and he didn't get along very well with his stepfather.
Right.
And there was issues there. And I believe a lot of that caused problems between them as a couple, and they just kind of pushed him off.
Yeah. So we'll get a little more into the relationship between John and Ricky. Basically, he's supposed to be walking to Daisy's house, and then she would drive, and they would go hang out and have fun, and it seems like they were pretty close.
And it's weird to me that she wouldn't just pick him up. Why does he have to walk 1.5 miles to her house and then go somewhere? Why can't she just go pick him up?
I don't know. Something I picked up about the newspapers in the 90s, they leave out a lot of detail. Because articles in 2015, 2016 that talk about this, they have way more information, but it's, almost 20 years later.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe she didn't have a car until someone came home from work, or maybe somebody was driving them. I don't really know if she was driving. It doesn't explicitly say anything.
Right.
Well, around 2:30 that afternoon, Daisy called the house again because he wasn't there yet. and John answered the phone. I've read in like a few articles. From my understanding, John was supposed to be at work, so I'm not really sure why he was home at 2:30, or maybe he was home from a shift. I don't have a lot of detail on where John worked or when he would be home from work.
Right.
John just said Ricky had already left. Then the evening comes around and Ricky is still not at Daisy's house. So she calls the home again and lets John and Ricky's mom, Tina, know that he still hasn't arrived. And I'm not sure how this conversation went, but Ricky's parents didn't report him missing until the next day. So I don't know if it's like, he has behavioral issues. He's 13. Maybe he's angsty, and they're like, he's just playing.
He's like blowing off steam somewhere.
Like,
he found a friend to stay with.
Right. Because maybe that's what they thought. Because I don't know why you wouldn't report a 13-year-old boy.
Well,
missing
you also
that
have
night.
to remember, though, that this is in the 90s and also in the middle of nowhere where kids obviously walk. And even later on, his dad mentions, his biological father mentioned that he was really good he would have survived in the woods.
Yeah.
So I believe it was just a different time, and you weren't as concerned, not saying you weren't as concerned about your child, but you weren't as concerned about the circumstances and where you were.
Yeah. And not everyone had cell phones, so they wouldn't be able to just call him. So they probably were like, well, let's give it one night. Let's not make a big deal out of nothing. Kids go wandering around all the time. And then the next day when he didn't come home, that's when they notified the police.
And then police didn't even do anything until kids had been gone a certain amount of time.
Oh, yeah, back then, yeah.
Yeah.
So they definitely waited that probably 24 hours or something.
So they said when he left his home, he had two backpacks with him.
Possibly.
And his wallet, but everything else was still in his room.
Yes, that was reported. And then the $20 that was mentioned that he was going to use at McDonald's, that was still on his dresser. So a lot of people were like, did he ever actually even leave his home? Because if he had actually mentioned that to Daisy, that he was going to spend that $20 and then left it at home, that seems weird. Also, 13-year-olds are forgetful. Who knows? I've read in a few articles that he was last seen walking on Oak Ridge Road, which is the road his house was on. I Google mapped his area, and it is just his house surrounded by trees, basically a dirt road into town. And it's really isolated. First off, I don't think anyone would have seen him on that road if someone abducted him randomly. But there's been reports that his two puppies, coonhounds, who were 13 weeks old, he was walking them to his cousins. And his relatives say that would have never happened. Like, he wouldn't have taken them.
Yeah, why would he have taken them if he was going to town with her?
Yeah.
It wasn't like just for a visit.
And also puppies. I don't know if like a 13-year-old boy can control two rambunctious puppies for a 1.5 mile walk.
Well, yeah, and it's also contradicting because they say no witnesses saw him walking to Daisy's that day. And then they say, well, they saw him walking with 2 dogs. So which one is it? And they never found the dogs, I don't think.
No. And I think that kind of what pointed them in that direction of saying he took them with him because the dogs were no longer there.
Yeah.
To me, it sounds like, and this is just me making this assumption, but it sounds like whoever didn't like him and got rid of him probably didn't like the dogs either and got rid of them at the same time.
Right. And that's what I mean when I say the articles I read from the 90s, they never mention the dogs. Articles today mention the dogs. And I always wonder, I feel like that would have been relevant information when they're sending all these search parties out. Hey, we're looking for this boy. Also, his 2 little puppies that were with him, supposedly.
Right.
So I feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding there.
Yes.
Because if you see a loose puppy, you're gonna capture it and turn it in, or say post an ad in the paper, found dog.
Yeah.
According to the police, there were sightings. People called in of the puppies somewhere and then of him in different places, not together, just different sightings of different things. But we also know how that goes.
Yeah.
If it never panned out, they never did find the puppies or him.
Yeah, because he was listed on America's Most Wanted. They got tons of reports around the country, like of people that looked like him. And then the local police would check it out and it would never end up being him. They have his dental records and they've come close before, but then DNA would be like, no, it's not him.
Right. And they did a wide search. They had helicopters. They had the FBI in. It wasn't like it was just a community search.
Yeah, I found an article back from the Herald in Jasper during that, like the first 2 weeks of him missing. And it's his dad and his uncle and police and several volunteers going out in the woods, going out on the countryside, just searching for him everywhere. And they talk about how the terrain is like kind of difficult to navigate.
Yes.
But like you mentioned, the dad talks about his dad, Ricky Thomas Sr., talks about how Ricky Jr. was very good in the forest and he knew how to get out. And because some people said maybe he got lost or turned around, but his dad swears that he would have been able to find his way out.
Yeah, and his uncle was quoted in the Logansport Tribune, said that if he ran away, he'd go to his grandma's. He wouldn't just go anywhere random. If he was going to run away, he would have ended up going to his grandma's, calling her to come get him, that kind of thing.
Right.
So that lets you know he wasn't the type of kid to just run off and hide by himself out in the woods anywhere trying to make a statement. If he wanted to leave, he had places he could go. He could go to his cousin's house. He could go to his grandma's house. Right. It's not like he didn't have an alternative.
So like we mentioned, his stepdad was the last person to have seen him. And we had mentioned a little bit that they might not have gotten along all the time. Well, in a report I saw, Daisy was interviewed by a newspaper person, a reporter. So a reporter
also known as
a reporter. I just wanted to test everyone.
Yeah.
This reporter named Stephanie Sylvie from 14 News interviewed Detective Steve Chambers and Daisy. While interviewing Daisy, it was mentioned that she had taken Ricky to the hospital before for head injuries that were caused by the stepdad, and that obviously didn't want to report the stepdad, so that's why she had to take him. And she said she felt a little uncomfortable doing it, and she was like, it's not my kid, why do I have to do this? She loved him, and so she took him and took care of it. This all just kind of came out after he was missing. I don't know how long before he went missing that was.
But she was like the biggest supporter, saying, oh no, his stepdad wouldn't have done it.
Right. That's
which is very odd.
Is because even though she knew he had been violent to Ricky in the past, she truly believed that Tina and John would not have harmed him. Even though he had harmed him in the past, but she doesn't think they would have killed him or anything like that. Which I think is a lot. I mean, I feel like family sometimes, I don't know.
You try to cover for family.
Right.
But Daisy and Ricky being so close to each other, you think Ricky would have confided in Daisy, though, if he was being abused or accused of doing things that he didn't?
Well, the other thing is Daisy was John's niece, and she would take up for her side of the family in regards to that. You would think it would be her uncle. I don't know. Like, to me, if my uncle was possibly abusing and may have been responsible for the disappearance of my cousin, I don't think I would outwardly say, oh, it's definitely not him. But yet you might, if newspapers were trying to push that, and if you were close to your uncle, you just never know in those situations what you would be quoted as saying. Right. You wouldn't say, oh yeah, he's a piece of shit.
That's true.
You just wouldn't say, well, I might, but you just wouldn't do that.
Right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about John, since he is the main suspect here, since he saw him last. And I want to talk about the days immediately after Ricky going missing. This is an interview with Stephanie Sylvie. She's interviewing the Sergeant, Steve Chambers. Steve mentions how John had told his employer that he was taking off the next day to visit his sister, referring to the day after Ricky goes missing. But he never did that. He didn't go visit his sister.
And they don't know where he was.
Right. He also didn't assist in the search for Ricky. So while everyone, like volunteers, family, everyone is searching for Ricky, John also doesn't help with that. So if you think that sounds concerning, let me tell you one more thing he did. Days after Ricky vanished, an anonymous caller called and told Tina Martin to go to a remote location in Perry County, and there she would find proof that Ricky was still alive. When she showed up at the spot, she found a snow globe that did belong to Ricky. And then later, John admitted to planting the globe there, disguising his voice and making the call to Tina.
Like, how can you fuck with someone like that, especially your own wife?
And your own stepson. Like, that's ridiculous.
There's no explanation that would have been good enough for me when it comes to that. Like, nothing.
Yeah, I know some people mention he was trying to give Tina hope to keep searching, but it's like,
no,
but you're not even
the
searching.
Worst thing you could do
to keep searching, and
you want to help. You go out and search yourself.
So she would keep going on with her life. I guess is what it said. But still, you don't do that.
No, if that was the case, if he really wanted her to keep going on with her life, then he would have
helped.
Well, he would have helped, but he would have also possibly tried to prove that he was dead, so that she would let it go.
Yeah.
None of that makes sense to me. Like, I don't know what would have been a positive outcome for him from that. Like, her coming gets, like,
if anything, it hurts her more to know that, okay, the one person I do have in my life is lying to me and pretending they know where my son is.
But knowing that she filed for divorce in 2000, it makes you wonder if he was doing it just because he was an asshole. Like if he was just poking the bear, so to speak.
Well, I imagine they got a divorce because all this is sketchy.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
That's what I was thinking. The snow globe incident was like the final nail in the coffin on that marriage.
Yeah.
Although I think this interview was in 1998. The reporter said that Tina and him were divorced, but that he showed up during the interview. And then the reporter had to leave because they were like, no more. Which, I mean, like you said, so this is 98. She said they were divorced, and it just, like you said, it didn't finalize for a while.
I don't understand why she would have stayed with him after that incident at all.
No.
Like, that would have been it.
It's really, sketchy. As police mentioned, without a body, it's really hard to say who did what or what happened. You know what? I found an article where it talks about him and Shannon Sherrill.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, it was titled Missing Kids, Families, Hope for Return. And this is in August 2003. And it just talks about how Shannon Sherrill is like the oldest missing case, and how the lady came forward and said she was Shannon Sherrill when it really wasn't. And just how like families stay hopeful that is the case, but with the actual missing person and not like a scam. But I thought that was a good callback from our previous episode.
Yeah. It all circles back.
Yeah. And then the detective talks about how it was interesting because the call happened the day before John was scheduled to be polygraphed. The reporter asked if he ever did a polygraph, and they said he's offered polygraphs, and sometimes he has participated in them, and other times he has walked out of the test. And when they asked the detective how he did, they said, well, I think he walked out of the test because he knew he wasn't doing well. So they won't release that information. They say they can't. It sounds like he's pretty suspicious.
Well, what's keeping them from releasing the results, though? Because in other cases, they straight up say, like, oh, they didn't pass their polygraph.
Yeah, I don't know if this is from 98, so maybe they couldn't back then, but now they could possibly. We all know polygraphs don't really work that well.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, John Martin passed away in 2005. So if he was involved, that information died with him.
His family still claims his innocence and says, we really hope that the truth will come out so that your name is not out there and it's not tarnished with this missing child. But yet there hasn't been any other suspects. My one thing though is, where could he have taken him? They searched all those woods. They searched that whole area. So he had to have taken him outside of that little radius around his home.
And Ricky was a big guy too. He was 5'9" and weighed 170 pounds.
Yeah. That's
at 13.
That's pretty big.
John could have easily been the same size as him.
Yeah. So in 2015, there's this confidential witness or something said that a few days before or something, before Ricky went missing, John had gone to Ferdinand and asked about family members' insurance claims, like how much money he would get if someone died. In 2015, someone said they should search Ferdinand Lake. There's Lake Ferdinand or something.
Someone give us a vote, please.
Well, they did. They searched it. But someone was like, the body's probably there.
The other thing I think is really significant is his description. He was described as the 5'9", 170 pounds, but also they described him as sandy brown hair, hazel eyes, saying that he had a black pullover jacket with Route 66 on it in white letters, with baggy blue jean shorts, black and white high tops, and he had scars on both of his cheeks.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, that's kind of weird, first of all, to have scars on your cheeks. I wonder what happened to him. But that's very specific for a stepdad who apparently doesn't care about him, according to some people. And if you think of him as a suspect, how would he know all those details about things that he was wearing?
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't tell you right now what my kids got on today. And I've been with them all day long.
I can tell you, it was like a tan big t-shirt and shorts.
Yeah.
Newswatch also learned from confidential sources that shortly before Ricky's disappearance, John Martin made a trip to Ferdinand, Indiana, inquiring about insurance policies on his family members. Pretty suspicious.
You can't do that, people. If you kill a family member, don't go check within the next month about insurance policy or before.
Yeah.
Especially before.
Yeah. There's just a lot of bad things that happened around John that make you suspect him.
Yeah.
But how many cases do detectives look at nonstop and then it ends up being a random person driving by?
Right.
So you never know.
And, the temperature was in the 40s then. So even though it was cold, it didn't get so cold that he couldn't have survived at night. If he was lost, because a few people have mentioned maybe he got turned around in the woods, which is strange to me because he knows where he was going. Why would he get turned around in the woods? It wasn't super cold like it sometimes gets in Indiana. He could have survived. If it wasn't Ricky, then who was it? If it was a random person, there's only, as far as right now, there's only one sex offender listed in that area, and they live just right down the road from where he went missing.
Really?
But he spent time in prison, and he lived in Kentucky, and he's lived different places, but to live that close to him is very odd. Who knows? He would have been maybe 22 or something when it happened, though.
Right.
I'm also kind of looking to see if it could have been like a passerby, like a trucker type of thing.
There's no trucks going down that road.
There's Interstate 64, but that would still be probably like a 30-minute drive to Bristow. There's no like straight way to get there.
Yeah, it's such a country road. It would have been, I think, noticed if a semi or something was driving.
For sure.
So weird. I know nothing about that area of Indiana.
Me neither. It's really... So I found Bristow information, and it was from the 1800s, and it was it used to be called Slab Town because of the sawmills, and they made the roads out of I don't even know. I was just this is wild, but I can't find anything about it today. I know who their first doctor was, but I don't know anything else.
But I don't know their population.
In 1907.
Slab Town? That sounds ominous.
I thought so too.
That sounds like
we could call this episode Slab Town.
Slab Town.
Sounds like there's a lot of hidden bodies in that town.
I know. It's creepy.
Yeah, and they do have a side-by-side age progression photo of him. I don't know what to say about this because other than it's the weirdest one I've ever seen. Only because it's the exact same photo, but maybe someone drew in a couple of wrinkles on him or something. I don't know.
They gave him a little peach fuzz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now that John has passed away, we don't have him for a suspect. At least he won't be held accountable. There's still the fact of if Ricky is dead, they need to find his body. His body's got to be somewhere, His dad, his biological father, Ricky Lane Thomas, he died when he was 39 years old.
Just 3 years after?
Yeah, in 2000. And he was a truck driver. He actually died from a medication toxicity as a result of IV injection of oral intended over-the-counter medications.
Say that 5 times.
Yes. And the over-the-counter medication that he took through IV is actually a medication used for a lot of people for detox for drug screens. And him being a truck driver, and he had several arrests for things of the drug nature, I'm pretty positive that that's why he was shooting up that medicine. And then you're not supposed to do that. And so it was an accidental death. So now all that's left is his mother, and her house burned down. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I found an article that talks about her house burning down. It was her and her daughter Jessica. So I don't know if that was her daughter with John or with Ricky. I don't know a ton, but how her house burnt down. And in the article, it talks about how this isn't the first time that something bad's happened to Tina, and they were starting a GoFundMe, but in 2000s.
Yeah.
And Tina was so hopeful that Ricky would come home one day that she, even though they lost everything in the fire, she rebuilt her home in the same spot. So if he came home, could find her. So
that's so sad.
It's really sad.
And I can see doing that. If I lost a child and didn't know for sure what happened, I would be afraid to move, because you always think, what if they were being held hostage somewhere, and then they got away, they were going to come back to the place that they remembered. So I see that. It's very sad. And I don't think that Tina had anything at all to do with this. I believe that it's going to come down to finding his body if he is deceased and tying it back to either a random person or the stepfather. But it's difficult to say that he might be alive. It's a lot like our Pennsylvania case where, you want to be hopeful and you want to have that little bit of hope, but yet the chances of finding a child after like 24 hours is very, very low. And the fact that he hasn't reached out, he hasn't come around. His mom actually, I believe it was his mother that was quoted as saying she believed that he was just waiting until he turned 21 and then he would come back. That probably stemmed from the bad home life, thinking, well, when he's 21, he'll come back home.
He just needs to be on his own for a while, and he'll come back when he's matured and gotten it out of his system.
But a 13-year-old staying gone until he's 21,
he wouldn't be able to stay. And you would think that if he truly wanted to get away from Tina and John, he would have gone to Daisy's,
or gone since to his grandma's, so close. Like his uncle said.
He had family that was on his side that would have supported him.
Yeah.
If you have any information about the disappearance of Ricky Thomas, please call the Indiana State Police at 812-482-1441.
We'd love some suggestions and feedback on the single episode cases and overall how the ladies are doing. Feel free to reach out via coldcasechronicles.com or social media, Cold Case Chronicles on Facebook and Instagram, and at Cold Case Crew on Twitter. And as always,
have the day you deserve,
especially if you're withholding information in the disappearance of Ricky Lane Thomas Jr.
I know your secrets and I'm telling on you.